Dog storms into hospital and stops baby's euthanasia? What happened next shocked everyone. I have a dream of reaching 1,000 subscribers by the end of this month. Subscribe and be part of this dream too. Thank you. Have an amazing story. Chapter 1. The Silence Before the Storm. The pediatric wing of St. Grace Hospital was unusually quiet that morning. Nurses walked softly through the sterile corridors, their voices hushed, their expressions solemn. In room 206, a baby boy named Noah lay connected to machines that beeped in a steady rhythm. Born prematurely and diagnosed with severe neurological damage, Noah had been in the ICU for months. Doctors had exhausted all options. That morning his parents, Sarah and Ben, sat holding hands, eyes red from tears, preparing for the unthinkable. Noah's life support would be withdrawn by noon. The hospital had authorized the decision after long consultations. Everything was set. Or so they thought. Downstairs in the hospital lobby, a nurse reached to open the sliding doors when a strange scene unfolded. A large golden retriever burst through, knocking over a stand of brochures and ignoring the startled cries of staff. His fur was matted from rain, and his eyes locked onto something beyond the crowd. With uncanny determination, the dog stormed past security, raced toward the elevators and then, as if guided by instinct or something greater, bolted up the stairs. Within moments, chaos erupted as nurses chased him, but he was too fast. No one could explain how he knew exactly where to go. The retriever crashed into the ICU, his paws skidding on the tile floor, and barked furiously outside room 206. Inside, Sarah jumped at the sound, her breath catching as the door swung open and the dog lunged forward. "What in the world?" a nurse cried out, too shocked to react. The dog placed himself between the doctors and the baby, growling low, protective. Everyone froze. Noah, who hadn't moved in days, suddenly twitched. A hand jerk. A flutter of eyelids. The heart monitor spiked. The doctors blinked in disbelief. He responded, one whispered. Sarah rushed to the crib, trembling. "Noah?" she whispered. The baby's fingers curled faintly around her finger. Ben let out a gasp, covering his mouth. The retriever sat beside the crib, eyes locked on Noah as if guarding him. "This can't be," the doctor murmured, checking the monitors. "His neural activity, this isn't possible." Nurses crowded around. No one knew where the dog had come from or how he had sensed what was happening. But one thing was certain, this was no ordinary animal, and what happened next would change everything. Chapter 2. A Pulse of Hope. The hospital room that once felt like a tomb now pulsed with energy and disbelief. Doctors gathered around Noah's crib, examining the monitors, checking vitals again and again. The baby, once unresponsive, now moved faintly, his tiny chest rising with slightly stronger breaths. Sarah clutched her son, her tears now mixed with confusion and hope. "Is he coming back?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Patel, the neurologist, was at a loss. "I can't explain it. His brain scans were clear, completely inactive. This shouldn't be happening." Meanwhile, the golden retriever sat calmly by the crib as if proud of his work, his eyes soft and wise. Hospital security finally caught up with the commotion and entered the room, ready to remove the dog. But Sarah stood up suddenly. "Don't touch him," she said with surprising strength. "He saved my baby." Even Dr. Patel raised a hand. "Wait," he said. "Let's not rush. Something extraordinary is happening here." A nurse scanned the dog for a tag but found nothing. No collar, no chip, no name. "Where did he come from?" someone whispered. Yet, the retriever showed no fear, no signs of aggression, only a quiet loyalty that defied logic. Everyone present felt it. This dog was not here by chance. Ben knelt beside the retriever, staring into its eyes. "Thank you," he murmured. The dog responded by gently licking Ben's hand, then laid his head on the floor, sighing softly. Meanwhile, Dr. Patel ran to fetch recent scans and compared them to new readings. "Neural responses are increasing," he said in disbelief. "His pupils are reacting. Look at this EEG." Nurses watched, stunned. "He's stabilizing," another doctor added. "His organs, they're responding better." Noah let out a soft coo. For a moment it felt like time had stopped. This was no medical miracle. This was something far deeper, something no textbook could explain. As the news spread through the hospital, more staff trickled into the room, drawn by the surreal tale of the dog who stopped a baby's death. People stood in awe, watching the once dying child now fighting, healing. "We were about to lose him," Sarah whispered, gently brushing Noah's hair. And then this angel appeared. Reporters began to call. Administrators were confused. Security was baffled. But none of it mattered. At that moment, what mattered was that a child had been saved, not by science but by a mysterious golden guardian no one could explain. Chapter 3. The mystery deepens. By the next morning, room 206 had become a quiet sanctuary. The golden retriever never left Noah's side, curling up near the crib like a loyal guardian. Nurses brought him water and food, unsure what else to do. "He's like he belongs here," one whispered. Noah's condition continued to improve, slowly but steadily. The machines showed promising signs. Oxygen levels were rising, heart rhythm regularizing. Even his color had returned. Doctors were cautious, but hope had begun to fill the room like sunlight through the windows. And yet, questions lingered. Who was this dog? How had he known? And why had he come at the exact moment? Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something divine had happened. That night, she sat by Noah's crib while the retriever rested at her feet. "You saved him," she whispered to the dog, who lifted his head and wagged his tail slowly as if he understood. She reached down to stroke his head. "Where did you come from, boy?" But the dog only stared back, silent and calm. Ben walked in holding a laptop. "I searched online. Every shelter, every lost pet listing. Nothing. It's like he doesn't exist." Sarah smiled faintly. "Or maybe he's not supposed to." Her words lingered in the air like a quiet prayer. Hospital administrators, though impressed by the turn of events, were also concerned. "We can't keep a stray dog in the ICU," said one board member. But public interest in the story had exploded. A video taken by a nurse had gone viral. Millions had seen the moment the dog burst in, stood between the doctors and Noah, and somehow changed fate. The hospital was flooded with calls, letters, and visitors. "People are calling him a miracle," another staff member commented. "Some say he's an angel. Others think he's a therapy dog who got separated from a patient." No one knew the truth. But no one could deny he had stopped the unthinkable. Later that day, an elderly janitor named Mr. Harlan, who had worked at the hospital for over 40 years, paused by room 206. He looked at the dog and froze. "I've seen that dog before," he said softly. "But it can't be." Staff gathered around. "You have." He nodded slowly. "Years ago. That's Buddy. He belonged to a nurse who used to work here, a pediatric nurse who died saving children in a fire. That dog was her shadow. After she passed, he disappeared. No one ever found him." The room fell silent. Sarah's eyes widened. The golden retriever looked up, almost knowingly. This was no ordinary visit. It was the return of a soul with unfinished purpose. Chapter 4. Whispers from the Past. The revelation stunned everyone. Mr. Harlan's voice trembled as he told the story. The nurse's name was Emily Grace. Kind-hearted, always singing lullabies to the babies. She died 10 years ago during a fire in the old West Wing. Saved 3 newborns before the smoke took her. That dog, Buddy, was always by her side. Loyal like no other. The name Emily Grace echoed like a ghost down the hospital halls. Staff searched old records and found her photo. A young woman smiling brightly in scrubs, and beside her, the very same golden retriever. It was impossible, but there it was. Buddy hadn't aged a day. Sarah held the photo beside the dog. His eyes, gentle and knowing, stared back. She touched the frame with a reverent hand. "You knew her, and you came back." The dog leaned in, pressing his nose gently to the image as if confirming it. Ben looked around, shaken. What if this isn't just a miracle? What if he was sent, by her? Rumors spread quickly. Patients, nurses, even skeptics began visiting room 206, hoping to catch a glimpse of the dog who had defied death. Some brought candles. Others brought flowers. The hospital that once prepared for grief now overflowed with awe and wonder. Despite the attention, doctors remained focused. Noah's recovery, though slow, was undeniable. He was breathing unassisted now, his eyes opening for brief moments. He even smiled once, just once, but it was enough to send Sarah into joyful tears. "He's coming back to me," she whispered. Dr. Patel remained cautiously optimistic. "We don't have a medical explanation, but we do have evidence. Neural pathways are reactivating. It's like something jump-started him." He looked at Buddy. "And we all saw what happened. There's no denying his role." The retriever, humble and still, didn't seek attention. He simply stayed, always alert, always watchful. That night, Sarah dreamed of a woman in scrubs holding a lantern, walking down a long hallway. Behind her, the golden retriever followed faithfully. The woman turned and smiled at Sarah. "He's in good hands," she said, and then faded into light. Sarah awoke with a start, tears on her cheeks. She looked down at Noah, who slept peacefully, then at Buddy, who raised his head and wagged his tail once. A warmth filled her chest. Whatever force had brought Buddy back, it had come not just to save a life, but to remind the world of the unseen bond between love, life, and loyalty beyond time. Chapter 5. Signs and Wonders. Over the following days, Noah's recovery bordered on the miraculous. He began to respond to voices, grip fingers with tiny strength, and even cry softly when he was hungry. Nurses marveled. "We've never seen anything like this," said Dr. Patel during his rounds. "His brain is reactivating as if a light switch was flipped." All the while, Buddy remained at his side, never leaving the room unless gently guided for food or short walks. He ignored cameras and crowds. His mission was clear: protect the child. And protect him he did, even barking when unfamiliar hands came too close without permission. Sarah and Ben barely left the hospital, sleeping on a cot beside their son. They had become media darlings, though they avoided most interviews. "This isn't about us," Sarah told a local reporter. "This is about a dog who showed the world that hope comes in fur and 4 paws." Children left hand-drawn cards outside the room, some with halos drawn above Buddy's head. Elderly patients whispered prayers as they passed. The story had touched hearts across the globe. People sent gifts, toys for Noah, and dog treats from every continent. But still the question remained: how had Buddy known? One afternoon, an animal behaviorist named Dr. Linda Voss requested a visit. "I study trauma response in therapy dogs," she explained. "And I've never seen a case like this." She entered the room, slowly approaching Buddy with a kind demeanor. He sniffed her hand, then calmly returned to his post. Dr. Voss sat beside him and placed a hand on his back. "He's carrying something old and deep." She turned to Sarah. "Some animals bond so strongly to humans that even death doesn't break it. I believe Buddy came back for one more mission." Sarah nodded, her eyes brimming. "And we're forever grateful he did." That night, Noah opened his eyes fully for the first time. He looked around the room, found Sarah's face, and let out a giggle that echoed like sunlight. Sarah cried openly, holding her son to her chest. Buddy stood up, tail wagging, and barked once, loud and clear. Nurses ran in, startled, only to freeze in joy. "He's back," one whispered. "Completely." The hospital erupted in celebration. Doctors clapped, some even cried. And at the heart of it all was a golden retriever who looked around one last time, then quietly walked to the window, gazing at the horizon as if awaiting his next calling. Chapter 6. The Farewell. The next morning Buddy was gone. Nurses searched every hallway, security combed through surveillance footage, but there was nothing. One moment he was sitting by the window and the next he had vanished without a trace. Sarah ran through the hospital, calling his name. Ben checked the entrance logs, but no doors had been opened. It was as if he had simply dissolved into thin air. "He came with the wind," Mr. Harlan said softly, "and left with the dawn." Sarah held Noah close, her heart aching, not from fear this time, but from the quiet emptiness left by Buddy's absence. A nurse found something near the crib, a small, worn hospital tag with the name Emily Grace engraved on it. It hadn't been there before. Sarah held it tightly in her palm, her heart racing. She turned it over and found a small symbol etched in the back, an angel wing. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "He left us a sign," she whispered. "He wanted us to know it was her." Ben stood beside her, silent but moved. "This was never just about medicine," he murmured. "This was something bigger, something sacred." And with that, they both sat in silence, watching their baby sleep peacefully, cradled in grace. Outside, the world kept turning. The story had taken on a life of its own, shared on television, blogs, and news platforms. The headlines read, "Heaven Sent Dog Saves Baby," and "Angel Nurse Returns Through Loyal Companion." Letters poured into the hospital from people who claimed similar experiences, pets arriving in moments of crisis, offering healing and peace. Faith leaders of many backgrounds spoke of divine intervention, of angels walking in disguise. And through it all, the name Buddy became a symbol, not just of loyalty but of the invisible threads that connect love through time and space. 1 week later, Sarah and Ben took Noah home. The doctors called it a recovery for the ages. Balloons lined the hospital doors. Staff hugged them, many in tears. As they buckled Noah into his car seat, Sarah looked back one last time. A soft breeze passed through the parking lot, and for a moment she swore she saw the outline of a dog sitting near the entrance, golden fur shining in the sun. She blinked and it was gone. But she smiled. Because she knew. Buddy had finished his mission. And somewhere, somehow he was still watching, still protecting, still loving, with the heart of an angel who never truly left. Chapter 7. Echoes of a Guardian. Back at home, the house once filled with sorrow now bloomed with joy. Noah's cries and laughter filled the rooms like music. Every milestone, his first attempt to crawl, his giggles at the family cat, was celebrated as a miracle. Sarah kept Buddy's tag on a necklace around her neck, a reminder of what they had survived. At night, when the baby stirred, she would hum lullabies and whisper, "Thank you, Buddy," to the sky. She couldn't explain it to others, not really. It wasn't just the dog, it was the presence he carried, the comfort he brought, like a soul who knew them before they knew themselves. Ben had started documenting the story not for fame but for Noah. "Someday," he said, "our son will want to know why his life is a miracle." He compiled photos, medical reports, letters from people around the world, and printed every message that mentioned Buddy. "It's a legacy," he said, "of hope." As he typed late into the night, sometimes he swore he heard the soft patter of paws behind him, or the sound of a contented sigh. It wasn't scary, it was soothing, like a quiet reminder that they weren't alone. Something, or someone, was still with them. Meanwhile, the hospital decided to honor Buddy. A bronze statue was commissioned, a golden retriever sitting protectively beside a child's crib. Beneath it, the inscription read, "For the guardian who came when hope seemed lost." The statue was placed in the pediatric wing, and soon became a place where families paused to pray, reflect, or leave small stuffed animals. Mr. Harlan visited often, smiling with misty eyes. "You were the best boy," he'd whisper. Some said they felt warmth when standing near it, like a silent blessing. The legend of Buddy had transcended one hospital. It had become a symbol of healing. Noah grew stronger each day, and his connection to animals became uncanny. He would light up around dogs, even unfamiliar ones, as if they spoke a language only he could hear. At 2 years old, he toddled to a neighbor's golden retriever, placed a hand on its head and said, "You're not him, but you're good too." Sarah froze. "What did you say, sweetie?" Noah just smiled. "He said to tell you he's happy." Sarah fell to her knees, overcome by tears. Whether imagination or something deeper, she knew. Buddy's spirit lived on in her son, in the heartbeat that continued because love refused to let go. Chapter 8. A Visit from the Past. 3 years later, a knock came at the door. Sarah opened it to find an older woman with kind eyes and a photo album in hand. "I'm Mary," she said. "Emily Grace's sister." Sarah gasped. They sat down, flipping through photos of Emily and Buddy together, smiling, joyful, selfless. Mary had seen the story online and recognized Buddy immediately. He loved her more than life. They were inseparable. When she passed, he disappeared. We searched everywhere. Now I know why. Sarah cried, hugging Mary tightly. He came back for Noah. The two women sat in silence, united by loss, by love, and by the miracle that had crossed time to connect them. Mary shared stories of Emily, the songs she sang to babies, the way she'd sneak treats to Buddy during shifts, and how she used to say, "If I go, I hope Buddy finds someone else who needs him." It was more than coincidence. It was fate. Sarah showed Mary the tag and Mary touched it with trembling hands. "She would have been proud," she whispered. "Of him. Of you." That evening, Sarah tucked Noah into bed and placed the tag on his nightstand. "A piece of an angel," she told him. "The bravest dog in the world." Noah nodded. "He visits me in my dreams, Mommy." Sarah smiled through tears. "I know, baby. I know." The reunion with Mary brought closure but also new meaning. Sarah and Ben started a foundation in Buddy's name, the Buddy Grace Fund, to support children in critical care and to train therapy animals for hospitals. Donations poured in. Lives were touched. Stories emerged of dogs, cats, even horses comforting the sick, sometimes appearing seemingly out of nowhere. "It's happening more often," one doctor said. "Maybe we've just forgotten how much healing comes from connection." And so Buddy's legacy grew, not just in bronze and memory, but in every animal who stood between despair and hope. As the years passed, the world moved forward. But for one family, the past was never forgotten. On Noah's 5th birthday, Sarah baked a cake shaped like a golden retriever. "For Buddy," Noah said proudly. Ben raised a glass. "To the dog who saved our son." They all laughed and cried together. And later that night, as the wind rustled through the trees and moonlight spilled onto the floor, Sarah swore she saw a golden shadow by the window, watching, protecting. She smiled, placing a hand over her heart. "We remember," she whispered. "Always." Chapter 9. The Dream of Light. That night, Noah had a dream more vivid than any before. He stood in a field of wildflowers under a golden sky. A gentle breeze carried laughter, and ahead stood Buddy, wagging his tail beside a woman in scrubs, her smile warm, her hand extended. "Hello, Noah," she said softly. "You're growing strong." Noah ran to her and hugged Buddy, who licked his face happily. "You're Emily," he said. She nodded. "I watched over you through him. And now you'll carry his light forward." When Noah awoke, he drew the scene in crayon: Buddy, the flowers, the woman. Sarah stared at it in silence, her heart full of wonder and unspoken faith. The drawing went up on the wall above Noah's bed. Guests often paused to admire it, unaware of its deeper meaning. One evening, a nurse from the hospital visited. Upon seeing the drawing, her eyes widened. "That's Emily," she said in disbelief. "I worked with her. That's her exact face." Sarah's breath caught. "He dreamed about her," she whispered. "And Buddy." The nurse sat down, overwhelmed. "Then it's real. Everything we felt, it was real." The story began to inspire new beliefs, new hope, even in the hearts of skeptics. Some things, they realized, didn't need to be explained, they just needed to be believed. The Buddy Grace Fund began hosting annual events: therapy dog parades, storytelling circles, and dream workshops for children in recovery. Noah often spoke at them, still so young but with wisdom in his eyes. Buddy wasn't just a dog, he told one crowd. He was a promise. That love doesn't end when life does. The audience wept and applauded. Newspapers called him the boy who speaks to angels. But to Sarah and Ben, he was just Noah, their miracle child, their proof that heaven sometimes wears fur and enters through hospital doors at the final hour, refusing to let go of hope. Years passed and Noah continued to thrive. On the eve of his 10th birthday, he asked Sarah, "Do you think Buddy will come back when someone else needs him?" She smiled through tears. "I think he never really left. He's just waiting for the next heart that needs healing." That night, Noah placed Buddy's tag under his pillow and whispered, "If someone out there is hurting, go help them, boy." And somewhere in the quiet distance, a golden figure stirred, ears perking up to the wind. A new journey was about to begin. Chapter 10. A New Beginning. Far away in another city, a hospital prepared for another hard decision. A young girl named Mia lay in critical condition, her parents exhausted and broken. The doctors whispered behind closed doors, bracing the family for the worst. In the cold silence of the night, a nurse taking a smoke break outside noticed a golden retriever sitting patiently at the gate. "Where did you come from?" she asked. No collar, no leash. Just a steady gaze and calm demeanor. "Come on in then," she said without thinking. The dog walked past her and entered the hospital as if he knew the way. It had begun again. Security was called, but the retriever had already made his way to the pediatric unit. There he found Mia's room, sat outside and waited. When the door opened, he walked in and laid by the bed. Her mother gasped, "Whose dog is this?" But Mia's heart monitor responded immediately, spikes of new activity. The doctors rushed in. "Something's happening," one said. "She's responding." No one could explain it. But those who had heard of Buddy knew. "It's him," someone whispered. "He's back." Messages were sent to Sarah and Ben. They knew. The legend of Buddy was alive, and love was still moving. News of the mysterious retriever spread fast. "He matches the one from years ago," reporters noted. But it didn't matter where he had come from. What mattered was the lives he touched. Mia survived. Another miracle. Another family forever changed. This time, Buddy stayed for a week, long enough to see Mia open her eyes and smile. Then, as always, he disappeared without a sound. "He left just like he came," Mia's father said. "But we'll never forget him." And the world took notice again. Hospitals began allowing therapy animals more freely, inspired by Buddy's tale. In Noah's town, the foundation received an anonymous photo, Mia hugging the golden retriever with the words, "He came to us too." Sarah stared at it with awe. "He's still answering," she said softly. Noah smiled. "Told you. He's helping the next heart." And so the cycle continued. Whenever hope ran low, whenever tears outnumbered smiles, a soft bark and golden light would return, reminding everyone that sometimes, the greatest angels walk on four legs. Chapter 11. The Gift of Remembering. On the 15th anniversary of Noah's recovery, the hospital unveiled a new wing, the Buddy Grace Pediatric Center. Families gathered, candles were lit, and stories were shared. Sarah stood at the podium with Ben and Noah by her side. "This isn't just about what happened to us," she said. It's about what can happen when we choose to believe that kindness can cross time, that loyalty can be eternal. Tears flowed freely as photos of Buddy and the children he'd helped were projected across the walls. The bronze statue was moved to the entrance of the new wing, where children stopped to touch his nose for good luck. That same day, an elderly man arrived, holding a weathered letter. "I met a dog like that when I was a boy," he said. "In a different city, different hospital. Saved my brother." The stories kept appearing, more than anyone expected. Buddy's legend wasn't tied to one place. He was a force, a spirit, a guardian that moved where love was needed most. A team of volunteers began documenting every story, every sighting. A map was created with glowing points all across the world. Each dot represented a life touched. It became known as the Light Trail, and Buddy was at the center. Noah, now a young adult, began studying animal therapy and spiritual psychology. "I want to understand why this happened," he told his parents, but also how to keep his light alive. He traveled, met other families, listened to their stories. And everywhere he went, people would nod and say, "Yes, we believe." For what Buddy had done wasn't just heal, it was unite. Different people, different faiths, all finding common ground in the simple, silent love of a golden dog who showed up exactly when he was needed. And that was his gift, reminding the world how powerful love could be. One evening, while watching the stars, Noah whispered into the wind, "Thank you, Buddy, for choosing me." And somewhere beyond the sky, a breeze answered, gentle, warm, and full of presence. Chapter 12, The Eternal Watch. The legend of Buddy would never fade. His pawprints were not just in the hospitals or the homes he visited, but in every heart that heard his story. He became more than a tale. He became a symbol of what's possible when love refuses to let go. New parents whispered his name in moments of fear. Children who had never seen him drew pictures of a golden dog with angel wings. Hospitals adopted golden retrievers in therapy programs, calling them buddies of hope. His name lived on in laughter, in comfort, in healing. On the final page of the Foundation's journal, Noah wrote, "If you ever find yourself in a place where hope feels lost, listen. Look for a golden light, a soft bark, a warmth in the room. Might just be Buddy. He always knows where he's needed next."